Hey everybody, Brian here, and this week we are going to dive into the wonderful world of sprained ankles. Everything from what causes them, what they actually are, and how to go about recovering from them. Now, this is not actually the topic that I planned on covering this week, but for those of you who follow me on Instagram know that a couple days ago I actually fell and sprained my ankle during one of my nightly runs, so it kind of seemed like a good topic to go ahead and bring up. Of course, before I dive into this, got to remind everybody I'm not a doctor, I'm not a physical therapist or anything like that. So obviously if you've sprained your ankle or think you may have sprained your ankle, you should go seek an actual medical professional. But I want to walk you through what I'm doing about my ankle and what my doctor prescribed that I should be jumping into. So let's go ahead and jump into this topic. Now, what is actually an ankle sprain? Just in case for some of you who don't know, really this is when there's some type of tearing in the ligaments inside of your ankle. Now, the most common form of this is a lateral ankle sprain, so that's a tearing of the on the outside part of the actual ankle itself. It's an extremely common injury. This can happen in pretty much any sport, but definitely in running. And what usually causes this is when you step wrong or if you kind of hit something and so your foot ends up rolling underneath your ankle or maybe even all the way underneath your leg, and you step down on it, and then you're going to end up doing some type of tearing to one or more of the ligaments that go through there. Now, I'm lucky in my case, mine's a relatively minor ankle sprain. Only one of the major ligaments in there suffered any type of damage, but depending on your situation, obviously it could be considerably more severe. Also, in a relatively relatively rarer case, there could actually be damage to the bones in this type of scenario, which is, of course, one of the reasons why you're going to want to go to a doctor to find out if there is some type of fracture or any other type of more serious damage besides just some of the soft tissue damage. Now, when you actually do roll your ankle or twist your ankle like this and cause a sprain, you are definitely going to know it. It's going to cause an awful lot of pain. Some of the other symptoms are there will usually be a lot of swelling in the area. You're also typically going to see bruising. Now, both the swelling, the bruising, and the pain is actually all caused by the blood kind of pooling in this area from the actual tissue damage and around this. And so what we want to do is, because obviously we want to minimize swelling and pain, is you're going to want to apply RICE. Now, I'm not talking about the fluffy white stuff. You don't need to go pack your ankle in this. RICE stands for rest, ice, compression, and elevation. So immediately after this injury, if it's possible, you definitely want to get ice on it. And at minimum, though, you're going to want to get some level of compression on there and get it elevated above your heart. And right, so the idea here behind the compression, the ice, and the elevation is that we're drawing that blood flow away from the area, which is going to reduce the swelling and therefore also reduce the pain as well. Once you've kind of done this emergency triage when you've caused that injury, that's when you're going to want to try to get in to see some type of medical professional afterwards. So again, like I said, you can find out if there's potentially a broken bone there, or if it's a more serious injury where you've conceivably actually torn one of the ligaments all the way through. In which case, you're going to need a much more aggressive treatment than if you've just kind of strained everything. So in my case, like I said, it was just a sprained ankle, and so the recovery. Quite frankly, it can take up to 12 months for a pretty serious sprained ankle. My doctor thinks that in my case, I'm probably looking at about 3 to 5 months for a full recovery. But let's walk through kind of the stages of what you actually need to do. So, first part of recovery. These first few days, specifically the first 3 days, you really want to try to keep the ankle immobilized. Now, my doctor gave me an air cast. These are something you actually can't just go buy. But basically what it is a really heavy-duty splint that wraps around both sides of the legs. You inflate it with air, and that squeezes your leg pretty good there and immobilizes your ankle. So you definitely want that ankle immobilized for those first 3 days, and really trying not to put any weight on it at all. So whether that's using crutches or just sitting around, you need to try to stay off it as much as possible. You're definitely still going to want to be doing elevation pretty regularly. You're also going to want to ice it pretty regularly. Again, the idea here is you're trying to keep the swelling and therefore the pain down. Now, after the first 3 days, when you shift into about, that first week there, that 4 to 10 days after you've actually hurt things, this is when you're going to be able to start introducing being able to bear weight on the ankle. You're going to want to introduce it slowly. Just doing a little bit of walking. You're going to want to make sure you're staying on flat surfaces. You're definitely going to want to wear that splint whenever you are actually up and about, but still taking frequent rest periods, right? Rest is that first R in RICE, which is still applying here. But the idea here is to slowly build yourself up to the point where you can actually bear weight on your ankle. Which then, now we're shifting into the second week out, so this is like days 11 to 17 after your injury. You should, assuming at this point that you've been able to walk without any pain, start to actually introduce some light jogging. Again, we're looking for flat surfaces here, straight directions, no curves. Don't want to be dealing with any sudden stops or anything like that. No football or basketball cutting or anything like that. Just a little light jogging. Start to slowly build up some of our stamina. As we move forward, into the third week here, so days 18 to 24-ish is kind of what my doctor had suggested is probably when I'll actually be able to start going back into a more easy run period. Again, we're not talking about anything fancy here, no cuts or quick stops or anything like that. Starting to introduce some curves are okay now, so it doesn't have to be just pure straightaways. And then he said after about 25 days I could probably go back to resuming my normal training regimen. Now, his recommendation, and I think it's a good one, is that after I get rid of that air cast, which in my case is probably going to be around day 10-ish, to still wear a splint of some sort when I'm actually doing exercises or anything like that. Now, there's a lot of folks at my Taekwondo studio who use a McDavid splint, so I've actually ordered one of those for myself so that when I actually do get to that day 10, 11, 12, whatever, when I'm out of the air cast, I'll be able to use that, and I'll provide a link to the one that I got. They've been very happy with it, and I figure if it's good enough for use in Taekwondo for people who have, in one case, broken an ankle at some point in the past, it's probably good enough for my rehab phases for running. He did say could take up to 12 months for everything to get fully healed. But it looks like after about 25 to 30 days or so, I should be back into a full normal running regimen for myself. One other thing that I did fail to mention earlier is once you get past that immobilization state, there are a variety of rehab exercises that you could do and should do while you're building that stamina up. The one that I'm going to be following, and the one that my doctor really directed me to, is actually being able to spell out the alphabet with your foot. So you're raising your leg up there in the air and using your foot to actually spell A, B, C, the whole alphabet. The alphabet. I'm not going to recite it for you. So anyway, that's where we're at. So hopefully here in a few weeks I will be back up to running all the time, especially since I'm only 2 months and about a week out from my next marathon, so I'm definitely jonesing to get back out there and get moving again. But hopefully everybody else is staying safe. Be careful, watch out for potholes, just watch where you're stepping, so hopefully you don't sprain your ankle. But if you do now, hopefully I've given you a few tips on how to actually go about your rest and recovery. Again, see your doctor. I know I wasn't going to, but my wife very wisely was like, no, you need to go, you need to make sure. And I'm glad I did now, even though in my case it was probably rest would have largely solved my problems. You never know if there is going to be a small fracture or something like that in there, and definitely in this case it's definitely better safe than sorry. So anyway, everybody have a great week, and I will see you all next week.